Welcome all of you to our gathering for church visitors and regional pastors. My name is Dave Denhan, and I work for Thrive, which is your denomination's agency that is church-facing. In other words, we come alongside of churches as opposed to Resonate and World Renew and some of the other agencies that are more focused on what's beyond the churches. We focus on helping churches and pastors. So that's why we've invited you to come along board for this afternoon's conversation. We see you in the same kind of work and love to understand our relationship as a partnership with you. So we're glad to have you on board. This is our first of 3 gatherings this year. And we're glad to do that as a way of being with you in the same space, but also just by way of walking you into some of the things that we see. That'll be our focus, in fact, for this afternoon's session together. We want to provide you with a perspective from our eyes on what we're seeing in terms of kind of general trends, realities, and so on in our denomination. Before we begin, I'm going to just name some of the staff, really all the staff that are part of our conversation today, and hope that they've been able to find their way in. As I give your name, just give a wave so we know who you are. First of all, Zach Olson. There's Zach, smiling and waving. Thanks, Zach. Sean Baker. Where are you, Sean? There you are. Awesome. Thanks, Sean. Reggie Smith is with us as well, I think. Reggie, where are you at? I've got everybody on about 3 different. Oh, there's Reggie. Yep, I see you. Thank you. Reggie wore his red today so we could see him. Thanks, Reggie. And Susan LeClaire. Susan, are you with us?
Yep, I'm here.
Okay, thanks, Susan. And by the way, if you're not on right now, could you mute yourself? I think I'm picking up some conversations from one of you in the room that you're at. Let's see, Julia Rathbun. I know I saw you around here as well. Julia, yes, there you are. Thanks, Julia. Amanda Bankhuizen. Amanda, are you with us? Let's see.
I don't think she's on yet, Dave, but she will be soon.
Okay, terrific. Thanks, Julia. Appreciate that. Trudy Ash is also
I'm here
with us. Trudy, welcome. Good to see you. And Elaine May. I know I saw Elaine. There she is. Yeah. Hi, Elaine. Thanks for being here too. Well, hey, these people are going to say a few more words about themselves when they present in just a few minutes. So I'll leave that to them when it's their turn to present in just a little bit. Let me say a word or two about format, and then we'll pray, and then we'll launch. Okay. Our format for this afternoon's gathering is we're going to present 6 10-minute presentations from our staff folks, giving you 6 glimpses into a few things that we think are important for you to be aware of, ranging from what's happening in churches in the HSR conversation to multicultural realities that we're facing as a denomination, opportunities, significant opportunities, to renewal opportunities, and a lot of stuff in between all those subjects. So 6 10-minute presentations, not a lot of time for interaction in those 6 10-minute presentations, but there will be plenty of time for interaction after we take a break. So we'll do 6 10-minute presentations, take a very brief bio break, you might call it, enough time to, do what you need to do and then come on back. And then after that, we're going to break up into 6 breakout Zoom rooms, and you get to choose which room you would like to go into for a time. And note that you are free to bounce in and out. You'll see, I hope you'll see, at the bottom of your screen, there's a breakout rooms tab. So you can hit that tab whenever you want to when you're in a breakout room, and then make another selection for whichever other breakout room you'd like to be a part of. So hopefully that functionality works. I've never tried it. I shouldn't say that. I am confident that it will be a gift and blessing to all of you. Absolutely, no doubt. Then after your breakout time, your group's breakout time is finished, your leader there will pray and then release you to the rest of your day. So you'll not be coming back to the plenary after those breakout meetings are finished. Maybe one final note, and that is about our future gatherings. We've got another couple planned for this calendar year, one in October, another gathering very much like this one, where we want to bless you with some training and some insights, and then ask for your input as well. And then a final gathering for this year will be in November. And just like last year, that will be an orientation for all new church visitors and regional pastors. We're aware that a lot of those spots get filled in the fall classes meetings. And in light of that, we want to be available to provide some training for people who are brand new to those positions. So that'll be planned for November sometime. More information later on both of those events. And when I say later, I mean like months later, not this afternoon later. Let's spend some time in prayer together, just acknowledging God's presence, and then we'll launch together. Okay, let's go to God, everyone. Father God, it's a gift and a blessing to be with you, no matter what conversation we're a part of, what deliberations we are holding, what people we are with. To have you as our constant guide and companion is a favor whose value is limitless beyond our understanding. So thank you for that. Thank you for redeeming us through Christ and for calling us into life with you through him and calling us into partnership with you in the ministry. We pray for your blessing, your presence, your strength for us as we talk and think together. We come from a wide variety of circumstances and a wide variety of places around North America. We give you our thanks that we are together now, shoulder to shoulder, so to speak, around this table, and look for you to give us your blessing. Give us your presence, we pray, and we pray all of this in Jesus' name. Amen. All right, everyone, I'm going to hand it off to my colleague, Zach, for a few minutes, and then we'll go kind of seriatim through a number of folks along the way here. Zach, Sean, and I share 10 minutes. And then we'll hand it off to Reggie, and we'll just go on from there. By the way, I will give a little heads up at the 9-minute mark so that everybody who's presenting has a little bit of a sense that they've got about 60 seconds left. All right. Thanks, everybody. Zach?
Yeah, thank you, Dave. And hello, everybody. Good to be with you today. Going to bring an update, some updates that we've seen as we've been working with churches, consulting with them around areas of conflict and challenge and change. And one of the challenges that our congregations are facing is decline. A lot of our congregations experience a big dip in membership and attendance during COVID, and some of us have bounced back, but many of us are still struggling to see those numbers from before the pandemic. And so that might not be a new dynamic, but what we are seeing is that grappling with this new reality has been challenging, particularly for smaller congregations who are having to do with less in terms of lack of volunteers, lack of qualified leaders, but also having a pretty robust memory of the days when the church was full before COVID, and now it's seeing that diminished reality. That's been difficult for churches. Another area in which we've seen some decline is around the HSR. And this is particularly in churches that would, at least in the States, be labeled as purple, having a healthy mix of both conservative or Republican members and perhaps some Democrat members as well. In those churches where there's a split, before they might have been able to live together pretty well, but the HSR is one of those issues that has caused a lot of division. And so there are people from both sides of the aisle who are leaving because they're not getting fully what they want, particularly if the churches are trying to find like a middle ground. Let's see. And then I mentioned the one last thing. I talked about this a little bit, but with that decline comes the challenge of finding leaders who are qualified and ready to lead the church into the next season of ministry. Sometimes what happens is as the church has declined, there's a group who is enthused and they can rally around a new mission that God has for them. We've seen that. But unfortunately, more often what we're seeing is that struggle to find volunteers and to find leaders. So one of the ways that we see you all stepping into this reality and helping churches is to help them, I think, grapple with the reality of reduced membership, but to do some asset-based assessment and see what they do have going for them currently, and what are the ways that even in this reduced capacity, they can still make a big impact for the kingdom. You can do that by helping them listen to one another as well as listen to God for the direction that he's leading them in. And in the cases of churches where pastors have gone and they're struggling to find one, we're going to hear more about that from Trudy later on. But to advocate for a specialized transitional minister is another wonderful way that you as church visitors and regional pastors can help our churches in decline. Back to you, Dave.
Sean, how about you?
Yeah, sure. So I'll say a little bit more about what we're seeing in our consulting relative to HSR conversations. And it's really like there's a broad range. So there's some churches who are finding this, they find the decisions of synod really a breath of fresh air. It feels like it's a unifying thing for their congregations, confirmation of why they're a part of this covenant, and like it's generated a lot of good feelings and like a strong sense of connection within their church and more broadly with their denomination. Of course, those folks aren't generally calling for consultations related to HSR, right? Because this is good stuff, and we usually get a call when things are going a little sideways. So what we're seeing is, like Zach alluded to, churches that have like a mix of perspectives within their congregations are finding this really challenging. And if you were sort of a church that was just kind of hanging on, say pre-COVID, and you were experiencing a little bit of a bounce back, this feels like a really unwelcome intrusion into your church. And so we've got a lot of churches we're working with who are in that space, trying to navigate how do we make decisions, how do we move forward when we couldn't get a congregational majority vote on anything. So how do we move forward? And then there are other churches who we're working with who, like, this is for them an occasion for discernment about maybe we need to disaffiliate from the denomination, where it's done sort of the opposite of that first group of churches where it said, boy, I don't know if we still feel like we belong to this community in the way that we used to think that we did. And that's like gut-wrenching, really hard stuff for churches to navigate. And so we're seeing this wide spectrum. We offered, I think at the last meeting we held, we offered some advice on the question of guiding into compliance, that Synod had used that terminology. So that's one thing for if you're a church visitor assigned to walk with a church who's trying to figure out what this all means for them. That could be a resource for you. The Office of the General Secretary published, they called it like a pastoral position statement on homosexuality, which includes a whole raft of like resources for churches beyond just the HSR. The HSR isn't the most user-friendly resource for a congregation, right? So some more user-friendly resources in the spirit of the HSR to support churches trying to live well into Synod's decisions. And then we've also been supporting churches a lot in the discernment process through the Next Steps discernment process. If they feel like they need to find a way to interact with the church, especially if the church is not all of one mind, how do we do that well? How do we make decisions that include people, but still are decisions? So those are some of the things we're seeing in our consulting world related to HSR stuff.
Terrific. Thanks, Sean. Thanks, Zach. Maybe the one final thing that I will bring as part of Sean, Zach, Dave's show is the church staff stuff, I'll call it. For the churches that are robust and healthy, and for the most part, and able to hire staff, a lot of churches still encounter issues and stuff going on relative to staff hires. Some of that is related to the fact that when churches hire staff members, they often see staff members as solutions to problems, and are less ready to see staff people as ministry partners. as people who are brought in to help the church accomplish its ministry better with everybody around the table. It's kind of plug and play. Hire a staff person and hand them, some rudimentary job description, and then let them go. In other words, let them see what they can do. So we're seeing a number of misses around in churches around the denomination around that very stuff. Poor hiring and firing practices, just a very, very limited awareness of what goes into a good hire, what's required, and the time frame required for a good process. And then very, very little awareness of what it means to let go of somebody well. Was in contact with the church just a couple of weeks ago where it was a very difficult story. Somebody had been let go rather suddenly, and that conversation picked up legs, so to speak. It just became a congregation-wide kind of conversation in ways that were just challenging for the pastor and the congregation, the council especially. So we're seeing some of that. We're seeing a lack of clarity around job descriptions, neglect of performance reviews that provide both accountability and encouragement. Those two things are strong constituent parts of a job performance evaluation. And when you've got all of these kind of misses at play, whatever might have been a small issue initially can become a pretty significant and substantial issue pretty quickly. It doesn't take a lot to make a molehill into a mountain, legitimate mountain. Where we see church visitors and regional pastors having a voice there is just helping councils especially to attend to good process, good hiring process, good releasing process, helping churches become really clear on job descriptions, lines of accountability, communication hopes and dreams, and disaster protocols. Churches are well advised to have a step or two in mind in anticipation of something really going off the rails. Churches don't need to have 10 steps. They just need to have 1 or 2 so that by the time you've gone through those initial steps well, you're able to hand off the conversation to steps 3 and 4 that you kind of create along the way. Anyway, that's the kind of stuff we're seeing from the Dave, Zach, Sean desk. And I'm going to hand it off to my colleague, Reggie Smith. Reggie, thanks for being here.
Hi, everybody. Here's the number I want you to kind of pay attention to. 40%. 40% of the Christian Reformed Church is people of color. In 1996, when the God United Diverse Family was written, it was 5% of the denomination was people of color. So God is up to something. And so I just want to give you kind of a little rough demographic picture of what's happening in the CRC. Right now, there's 117 Korean churches, which is our largest group. And they just added 5 more churches just last year. And so one of those things that's happening, like Classes Hudson, was once at one time almost 90% white. And now Classes Hudson is about 50% both white and Korean. And so demographic change is happening rapidly in the Christian Reformed Church. Right now, there's 60 multi-ethnic congregations. That amounts to about 2,500 people. And 5 more of those churches have joined in the last 2 to 3 years. Another fast group is our Latino churches. We just added about 25 Venezuelan churches in Southern California. And just this past week, the first Venezuelan pastor has passed his classical examination. And so these are the things that are happening, especially with our Latino group, is just growing expeditiously. The third fastest growing group is our Southeast Asian and Pacific Islander group. So that includes both Laotian, Vietnamese, Hmong, Chin, Filipino. And what we're seeing is that's happening all on the East Coast, in which there's a lot of those high populations are happening. But also another dynamic, that they're not only planting churches in North America, but they're also planting churches in their home countries. And so we have this kind of collapse of both the classical boundaries and the international boundaries, which is part of the conversation that we're going to be having for a few years. How do we begin to see the whole family of the Christian Reformed Church? That's above my pay grade. You're not going to get the answer from me. Talk to the big guys about that. Well, what's the number one way in which this growth has been happening? Most of that has been happening through church affiliations, not by church plants. Whole churches are joining the Christian Reformed Church. That brings a different dynamic in which both regional pastors and church visitors have to really ask some really deep questions about how do you come alongside of a church that's Chin? How do you come alongside of a church that's Latino? How do you come alongside of a church that's Iranian Farsi? These are the new dynamics that you're going to have to kind of grapple with. Is your classes ready for that change? It's not a matter of if, it's when. So what are the top issues in which diaspora groups and ethnic groups are really grappling with? I want to mention 3 of them for you. The classical environment is lonely. The classical environment is a place in which they don't feel they actually belong. How can your classes, in terms of the positions how do you create a sense of belonging that doesn't feel like they're an add-on or an annoyance? The third one is that there's none or little connection to the why of classes. Why do you even have class? What is that all about? What we find is that there's not a lot of hospitality toward helping these groups to say, here's what classes is for. Here is why these groups of churches meet together. Here is what do church visitors do? Do they just come and visit? Or is there an actual role that they actually play in helping in terms of accountability and also detecting issues and concerns that may be? What does the regional pastor does? Why do he needs to come alongside of those pastors in a particular classes? And how can he or she help them to actually find that the Christian Reformed Church matters to them? So, and then the last one is, how can classes actually help them in ministry if they're struggling? If you don't have anybody who speaks Chin, you got to fix that Chin problem. If you don't have anybody who speaks Spanish, you better fix that right away. You need somebody who speaks Spanish. Again, this is not if, it's when. So here's some questions that you need to consider as church visitors and regional pastors. Which language groups are in your classes right now? What resources are needed in order to reach them? In order to build the kind of relationship, most of that is relationship building. It's not necessarily about policy, even though that's important, but how do you build friendship? How do you build relationship with them? The next one is, nobody ever tells diaspora and ethnic groups that there's a high cost to belonging in the Christian Reformed Church. There is a high cost. It's not just about knowing the policy and procedures, but there's also other things that most of those groups have no idea about. And so what ways are you preparing or welcoming hospitality for these diaspora churches and pastors so that you have an opportunity to speak to kind of those naughty and concerns that may pop up in those particular churches, and that you're going to have to kind of work on your cultural competency in order to be able to speak into their lives, or even have the credibility to speak into their lives. Most diaspora ethnic pastors are commissioned pastors, most without succession plans for their churches, nor plans for retirement. How can you begin the conversation with them? That is going to be an ongoing thing in which we're now finding that a lot of these diaspora pastors are going commissioned pastor, but when they get to the end of their life, of their careers, there's not much for them because they're not pastors or ministers of the word and sacrament? How does classes come alongside them and begin to have this conversation that it's not just your career that we're concerned about, but what happens after your career? California South has examined and passed the first Venezuelan pastor in this newly expanded classes that crosses national boundaries. Could your classes be next? Inquiring minds want to know. And then my last question is this. Most diaspora leaders don't know how classes work. Could church visitors become an opportunity for learning and belonging? Promoting the one family conversation, which Trudy will talk to you a little bit later, in your visit or pastoral conversations for regional pastors is how to help to focus on the need of listening and supporting the growing number of CRC diaspora and ethnic churches and allowing those members to be seen, heard, and feel that they are valued and welcome at the classical level. We can talk more about it in our breakout. Back to you, Dave.
Awesome. Thank you, Reggie. That 40% number is pretty significant. Kind of an aha moment for a lot of us, I think. So thanks, Reggie, for bringing all that to our attention. I'm going to turn it over to Susan LeClaire, Director of Candidacy. Susan?
Hi there, good to be with you today. Dave's asked me to talk a little bit about bivocationality and the impact and some of the things going on with that within the denomination. So there's been a lot of really excellent work done to research and understand bivocationality in our denomination in the past few years. So a lot of what I'm going to share with you comes out of the work of the Synodical Task Force that was put together, the Financial Shalom team, and also Amy Schenkel and others from Resonate who've done just tons of really great research and had some good conversations with bivocational pastors. So I'm going to highlight just a few of their findings and hopefully just get this on our radar so that we can continue the conversation and just have it fresh in our minds. If you read the Bivocationality Task Force report in Synod's agenda last year, you heard some of the reasons that this is becoming a more common thing within the CRC. And of course, the most common reasons have to do with finances. There's churches who are either just emerging or they're in decline and maybe cannot support a pastor with an adequate full-time salary yet. But there were also some very intentional reasons for bivocationality that were very interesting to note. And I think they're important for us to keep on our minds and continually reflect on. Some pastors and churches are choosing it because of the opportunities that bivocationality creates. It helps them to engage with the community and relate better to the culture, giving them really a broader experience of the church. They've said that it takes pressure off having a certain size of a church, and it allows them to spend money and resources and time on caring for the poor and the marginalized. Some would refer to themselves as co-vocational because they really feel that they have a strong sense of call to their marketplace profession that they never really intend to leave. And their call to plant a church or pastor a church seems to naturally fit alongside that marketplace career. And sometimes the arrangement begins because of financial hardship, but then it sort of emerges and continues on because of all the goodness that it's bringing into the congregation and the pastor. And I'll tell just a quick story. My story was like this. For about 11 years that I pastored in New Mexico, I was paid a full-time salary, but it wasn't really a living wage. So I always sought out other part-time jobs. And over those 11 years, I used my music ed background to teach music theory as an adjunct professor at a local community college. I taught private voice lessons and piano lessons, and eventually I started a homeschool fine arts program for the community. And for a few years, I served as a workplace ministry chaplain for the staff at an assisted living community. So when I look back on all that, I can really resonate with the goodness that this brings because I felt that a lot of times I felt the largest gospel impact was in those spaces. And although it might be that it was just easier to see it in those spaces than it was sometimes in the church, but in any case, they brought incredible encouragement to me and also to our church. We suddenly had people walking in the doors that would never have come into a worship space, and we built relationships and a good reputation in our community through those means. So So I want to talk that's just an example of what a lot of stories are coming in similar to this about bivocationality. How can we serve and come alongside these bivocational or co-vocational pastors? I think there's a few different components that seem very important and have been pointed out that are important for us to keep in mind, and you as regional pastors and church visitors. First of all, proper support. Has the conversation about bivocationality been adequately addressed in the contract conversations? Sometimes not. And if not, is there a way to have it now that won't put the pastor in an awkward position? Can you come alongside to advocate and be the person who brings this up perhaps with the counselor or helps that person bring it up? The regional pastors and church visitors might end up being advocates at times for bivocational pastors. It's important to hear also what the pastors are feeling about whether they're being paid a fair wage for the hours that are worked. Part-time pay for full-time work really is not a wonderful thing. And it's a pretty common thing. I see it a lot. I see it a lot with Korean pastors who are serving in churches, but I'm sure it's more widespread than that, and it occurs in lots of different spaces. Is it fair to for a church to expect full-time work out of a pastor, not allowing him or her to gain another means of employment to supplement that? Is it fair for the church to say, your spouse's income will support you so that you can work full-time for us, but get paid almost nothing? Many pastors will agree to that because they're dedicated and they care about the ministry and they don't want to make money an issue. And sometimes the spouse might even support it for a while. But what does it do to the family over time? If this person has 2 jobs, when is vacation or sabbatical possible? These conversations are the ones that need to be had, and the pastor might need an advocate in those conversations. Insurance is also a big issue that has to be addressed. Retirement is a big issue, as Reggie mentioned. Some pastors their congregations haven't been able to provide anything in the way of retirement, and that's really difficult. Also, are the responsibilities falling to the pastor that maybe should be done by members of the church, especially if they need to weed down hours and make it part-time instead of full-time? And also, are they receiving enough spiritual support and accountability? All of that is kind of part of the proper support element that we have to keep in mind. The second is to keep in mind honor and inclusion. It's important for the classes not to treat bivocational pastors as second-class citizens, but to involve them and keep them in mind in decision-making, scheduling of meetings, all that kind of thing. It's important for their voices to be able to be heard, especially because they carry with them the expertise of their role in the community, which really could bless the whole classis and the other pastors of classis. They might have natural connections also that enrich the classis and its ministry. So it's a two-way street of blessing there for the classis to be attentive to their needs and them to be able to also speak into the classis matters. The third thing I wanted to point out just in terms of support for them is just supporting their purpose and their connection. In some cases, one vocation really can fuel the other vocation, or they can complement each other, or sometimes they even financially support each other in some cases. And I just want to give you an example of an email I just got from a candidate who just took a bivocational call as a pastor / chaplain. So I think she's congregational pastor and also a chaplain. And she said this: "It's been such a whirlwind, but I'm officially a co-vocational pastoral care pastor at Mountain View CRC and chaplain at St. Joseph's Healthcare Hamilton." Her name is Jolene Veenstra. My calling church called me as both chaplain and pastor. She said that made for a unique letter of call, and we were able to address both my roles in my examination as well. I love how my church is embracing and taking on their ownership of a local hospital chaplain, and how the two roles complement each other so well. Our knitting guild just gave me a slew of brightly colored blankets to give out at the hospital. Our council is also discovering that having a dedicated pastor to support their work and help with best practices for trauma-informed ministry is a real blessing. But I think I'm blessed more than anyone for the opportunity every day to walk side by side with Christians and non-Christians struggling with the stuff of life and asking questions about their relationship with our loving God. So pretty cool email. I thought a great testimony from Jolene. It's a really beautiful experience when the church really supports, understands, blesses, and even participates in the other vocation. So there may be ways that you can
Hey,
encourage
how's
this
it
to
going?
happen as you walk alongside the
Good.
pastor
I'm on
and
a
the
Zoom
church.
call, but I'm getting away with it here.
I'll pause for just a minute. Hopefully the person will mute. I don't know who's talking, but and then the fourth thing is accountability. The council and all those who support the pastor should be very aware of their emotional health. Does the person seem overstressed, weary, depressed, anxious? If so, are there ways to help them get the care or maybe create the boundaries that they need? Is the spouse still feeling comfortable with the arrangement after a few years? And are they happy with the way that the pastor's spouse is handling how this is going? And definitely, is the church doing their job of providing spiritual support and accountability? Are they understanding really the need for Sabbath and help with integrating rest into the person's schedule? All of this is just so, so important. And with this in mind, Synod 2023 tasked the General Secretary's office with coming up with some kind of a wellness assessment for bivocational pastors and also an exit interview. So a draft of those two things is being drawn up. However, and Thrive is doing the most of that work. However, as we reviewed that task together with Thrive, we decided it would be helpful to come up with some tools for wellness assessment and exit interview for all pastors, not just bivocational pastors. So Thrive is going to be working on that and probably rolling out something that can be used really soon in the fall. And our thinking was that you would be natural implementers of some of this. Hopefully, we're hoping you might be willing to do that. Regional pastors, we would love to know how you feel about having an assessment tool to use with some of the pastors that you meet with, bivocational and other. And church visitors, we would love to know how you would feel about conducting these exit interviews to see if you can find out where breakdowns may have occurred in the support system when somebody does leave. And so I look forward to hearing your insights in our small group time if you want to join my small group later. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. Bivocationality, a lot of denominations out there have been doing it a long time. It's just their default spot in some respects. And for us, it's kind of a newer game. So thanks, Susan, for being part of that. I'm going to turn it over now to Julia. Julia, thanks for being here.
Good afternoon. I'm grateful to be here and have a chance to talk with all of you a little bit about Safe Church Ministry and what has been going on and talk about responding to some really hard situations. And since I can't share the details of the abuse situations that we've been working on or specifics of how we've been supporting with those specifically, I want to highlight how your roles intersect in unique ways with Safe Church and how we can work together towards the goal of safer churches. I'm going to set the framework a little bit for the breakout session later, where we'll be able to take a deeper dive into this topic. But I'd like to talk about the intersection of your roles, safe church practices, highlight some resources, and talk about ways that we can be prepared to respond to an allegation of abuse. As church visitors and regional pastors, you have a unique connection to the classes and churches in a way that we as Thrive staff members do not. They know you personally and trust you and already have established rapport. Your mandates and guidance to support and guide pastors and advise them, hold councils accountable are things that we at Thrive and Safe Church coordinators in your classes need and rely on to ensure that abuse is responded to appropriately. I can imagine how difficult it might be to hear allegations of abuse at a church in your classes. It's shocking and hard to process, and increasingly so when the accused is a colleague that you know and love. Perhaps this is the first time that you're dealing with an allegation and you might not know what to do or how to respond. It can be challenging when a pastor or a church calls on you for guidance or support when they've been accused of something or have something happening at their church and you need to be there to offer advice and support. Maybe it's not a straightforward situation, as most of them are not, and the way forward is really murky. I hope to give you some assessment tools today. It's important to talk about when we at Thrive may come to you for help if abuse has been alleged, since you have closer access to the churches and already have established relationships. We may need you to participate on an advisory panel or an investigation. In a few minutes, when we go into the breakout session, I want to start by telling a story from a time in the past, so quite a while ago, about 30 years ago, when things did not go well in a congregation and they experienced a great amount of harm and hurt. There had been more training and awareness of abuse concerns. I think that people might have been able to fill their roles more broadly and the outcome might have been different. So I'd like to share that story and process a bit. One way to begin assessment when you are going into a church is that I'd urge you to boldly ask what the church is doing to prevent and respond to abuse. Ask about their utilization of safe church policy and the code of conduct and how they're doing in this area in general. We all recognize how uncomfortable this can be, but talking about these issues that lurk in our congregations can help to prevent situations of harm. When we can get easily bogged down with so many other things, talking about these policies and practices can bring them back into conversation and back to the forefront of our minds. We have some resources that I would like to share with you. We have been rolling out a newer process for assessing allegations of abuse that we've called Thrive investigations. We're excited about this process because sometimes an advisory panel doesn't fit a situation super well, and we need a different process to help uncover the truth and find a way forward. This process allows someone from the outside who isn't too close to the situation to investigate with an objective and outside perspective. If we were to utilize this process, we might call on one of you to participate as an investigator. We find that having someone who is known and trusted by the church adds credibility to the process, as they can vouch for a fair process that was completed with integrity. At the conclusion of this process, a report with recommendations is provided to the council. You will have the opportunity to follow up with them to see how the recommendations have been implemented and how it's going. You could also provide accountability and advice if they need extra encouragement to follow through. We have the Power to Do a Good course, which is an online self-guided course that's about 4 to 6 hours, and it explores the abuse of power. It's necessary to be aware of our power and how we can best use it for ministry by doing good and not causing harm. If you know of a church who is struggling with their safe church policy or it needs to be reviewed or updated, I am happy to point you to areas of the website that have sample policies, guidelines, and suggestions. We've also had the opportunity to review a number of these for congregations and provide feedback and suggestions. So I am happy to do that if that is something that would be helpful to a church that you are involved with. I know that things may come up, but you don't really have the space or time to ask questions, and we would like to make space for that this afternoon. So I look forward to spending some time in group discussion and answering questions that you may have in a little bit.
All right, thank you, Julia. Just to build a little bit on what Julia just shared, sometimes we'll talk with churches about instituting policies that provide for safety. And the folks who are most interested, we sometimes find, are the elders and the deacons around the table who are business owners and realize from their business context how important it is to have these policies in place. And helping them to make the bridge from the business context to the church context is valuable for us to do, to help them sense that this is a conversation that's real and important for the church context as well. Julia, thanks for your work. Thanks for your presentation as well. Let's turn it over now to Trudy Ash. Trudy is one of our regional catalyzers, and she and Kim Rankins, one of the administrative assistants here, have been working on some updates to the pastor search process. Leslie Van Milligan is part of that conversation too, but Trudy, thanks for being with us.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I'm going to share my screen and get it in the right spot here. Hold on. All right, can everybody see the slides? All right, so just some stats around the pastor search process as it is right now in our denomination. Currently, there are around 170 congregations looking for a pastor, and about 15, which makes up about 15% of our denomination. We currently have 318 students at Calvin Theological Seminary, which is up a few from last year. We currently have 78 students in the MDiv program, which is up a little bit from last year. There are 45 EPMC students currently, 23 of them which are working through Calvin SEM. And there are 38 candidates that are eligible for call listed on the candidacy website currently, but most of them have already accepted calls. So when you guys get the question, where do we start from a church that maybe just became vacant? There's a lot of church work that has to happen before search work in this pastor search process. And probably one of the most important tools that we have is called More Than a Search Committee. It's about a, 30 to 40 page booklet that's available online. You can download it, or you can order hard copies as well. But this workbook really helps churches work through what needs to happen before you actually get to the search process. So when somebody asks you, where do we start? This is the best answer, especially like for their councils, even to dig into this book a little bit and to put some groundwork in place. It covers things like, is the church ready for their next pastor? Maybe they're better suited to have an interim come in or a specialized transition minister to come in. How are they going to put their search team together? Who are they as a church? They should probably do some surveys and some listening sessions and really get some feedback from the congregation to kind of learn who they really are, and which will help them find a pastor that can be successful with them in their ministry. And there's tools in there to help them create their church profile and their job description. The search team's first step then is to reach out to Kim Rankins. Her email is there. And what she sends them is this pastor search guide for a successful search with all kinds of helpful links to articles that will give them some foundational knowledge of how this works, ideas and tips on how to make it work. The church profile is on there that they can fill out. An unconscious bias video, which is great for those that are going to be doing conducting interviews to go through. And all the steps are on there, including how to get onto the pastor portal. So the pastor portal it used to be years ago that there was a church profile that you would fill out about your church, and then pastors were filling out a profile about themselves. And then there were people at the denomination that would sit with both, and almost like a matchmaking service, they would kind of match them together. And then they would help the search committee for that church and say, here's a few possible candidates for you. That doesn't happen anymore. So the church profile and the pastor profile are still closely related, as in like questions on both are similar. So a church will get asked a question in the pastor and you can see how they line up. But churches it's on themselves to put their church profile out there for pastors to see. And then there's this pastor portal that search teams can get access to, where you can fill out, what kind of a pastor you're looking for, size of church you are, what's the cultural makeup of your church, your geographical location of your church. And that then it gives you a big spreadsheet, and it narrows it down for that search team of pastors that have clicked those boxes on their profile. And so that's how they start to look at pastors and narrow down how that works. From there, because of the way things are today, you go online and you listen to sermons and you learn things from the church's website about the candidates. So the matchmaking happens at the search team level, not at the denomination anymore. The network is the denomination's online service for blogs and resources, and there's a church job page on there. So we encourage churches to put a little ad together. They will attach their church profile and their job description if they want, and whatever other creative ideas they may have. And that goes on the network and then is available for people to see. What we're learning is that churches aren't getting a lot of candidates applying off of the network. But what it does do is it gives the search team an easy link to share with possible candidates where they can find all of the information they want about the church. This is not in replacing of putting ads in the banner, but it has become more popular than churches putting ads in the banner. But you still, as most of you know, will see ads in the banner. Lastly, as regional pastors and church visitors, what can you do to kind of help this church process? So the first thing I would say is point to the website on crcna.org under Thrive and Pastor Church Support. It is actually pretty easy to find. That may sound like a lot of clicks, but it's pretty easy to find. There's a lot of information there. So if you point your church councils that you're working with or pastors to that, there's information for both churches and pastors on the website. Again, encourage this idea of church work before search work. That's we have quite a few times where churches will form a search team before they even really think through who should be on the team. So just little things like that can make a big difference for the success of a search. It is very helpful to us at the denomination if you hear of a vacancy to let us know so that we can support that church and reach out to them. Sometimes we don't hear about it until like the following classis meeting, and then we missed out on who knows how much time of kind of helping them get ready for their search. Help identify a church counselor for the vacant churches. Encourage pastors to update their profiles. How that works is when a pastor is available for candidacy, they fill out a profile and it goes in this system. But if they don't have to update it if they don't want to after that. So it could be that some of these profiles that we have on there, if they've been at their church for 10, 15 years and haven't filled it out, their profile is still there, but it's 10 to 15 years old from the beginning of their ministry or so on. And so it is helpful for search teams if pastors regularly update their profile. And I think it's important to encourage them, even if they're not necessarily looking. I think it's a good process for pastors to go through. The questions are good that they have to fill out on there. So I just would encourage pastors to regularly update their profile. And then finally, regional connectors. So I am the regional connector for the U.S. Central region, but there is regional connectors for every region except U.S. West currently is open right now. But regional connectors are going to be taking a bigger role in supporting vacant churches. We're kind of working on a fairly large project right now of how best to do that. So as regional pastors and church visitors, please connect us to them or them to us, because we'd love to be able to support them and pass on this kind of information to them as well. And so, yeah, when we get to the breakouts, if there's any more questions or comments about this process, I'd love to hear them and to have a conversation about it.
Terrific. Thank you, Trudy, very much. Yeah, Jim Kuiper, you put in the chat box a wonder or concern really about, I'm going to call them headhunters, agencies that churches might hire to find their next pastor. And you shared some discomfort about that. I think we would share that. We recognize that churches see that as a nice, kind of an efficient way to find their next pastor. But some of the challenges are that it's hard to identify any church polity differences of understanding, some theological differences that may not be identified in a process like that. So Jim, we would share some of that concern. But anyway, thanks Trudy very much for your presentation. And now Elaine on church renewal. Elaine, thanks for being with us today.
Hey everyone. Good to be with you. I've been scrolling through your little pictures on my screen, and I've been resisting sending some of you just personal chat notes. I see so many names I recognize and faces, and it's good to see you. It's good to be with you. I'm kind of the cleanup crew I think, at the end of an hour of listening. So I'm going to engage you in an activity. It's going to take all of about 1 minute and 21 seconds. I'm going to share my screen, and here's the instructions. Let me share the instructions. Open your chat. You're going to watch a video, and I want you to count the number of times the people wearing white pass the basketball. Okay? Count the number of times the people that are wearing white are passing the basketball. And then I want you to put that number in the chat. And then I'll apply this to what we're going to talk about. This is connected, I promise you. So sharing my screen and the sound. All right, here we go.
Count how many times the players wearing white pass the basketball. How many passes did you count? The correct
Oops,
answer.
I didn't pause that quick enough. Oh, no. Okay, how many of you got 15? Did you get 50, 14? That's close, 13. Okay, good, good. Did you see the gorilla? All right, we got some yeses. I'm guessing there are some no's. I'm going to share my screen again. You'll get to see it again. All the clicking of these buttons. Hold on a minute. Here we go.
Is 15 passes.
15 was the correct.
But did you see the gorilla? This video is from research by Daniel Simons and Christopher Chabris and
All right, so what's the point? The point, well, one of the purposes is we're an hour into a bunch of us talking at you, and just to keep you engaged. The other purpose is you as the regional pastor and as the church visitor have a unique perspective. You're able to walk into a church that's very focused on ministry and they're just very familiar with what's happening in their context and in their congregation. And sometimes ministry leaders can have blind spots. For some of you, and the first time I watched the video, I missed the gorilla too, because I'm so competitive that I wanted to make sure I got the right number. I didn't do either correctly. Anyway, you have a unique position to see into the church or the situation and to be able to engage them in recommendations, maybe for them to participate in an intentional process to look at a church renewal process. And so what I just want to use my 10 minutes for during this moment is, and I'm going to share my screen again, is to talk with you a minute about what does an opportunity to recommend an investment in church renewal sound like? So when you're engaging with a particular congregation, what we've found there are unique moments when a church is ready and ripe to engage a focused process to renew their vision and renew ministry. And here are just 5 options. These are just 5 suggestions of things to listen for to recommend a renewal process. And some of those we've actually heard in the other presentations that preceded mine. One of them is, we don't have anyone new to serve on council. This is one of those opportunities to say, hey, might you consider some leadership development, which I would put in the category of church renewal. Another is, our pastor just took another call. When a church is in transition, it's a great opportunity for the church to do some renewal work and to get clear on who they are before they call their next pastor, just to ensure that their fit is good between the pastor and the congregation. Another thing that we've heard is, hey, we've just come through a season of conflict and things are getting back to normal. Often this also sounds like it's time to focus on ministry. We've been distracted. It's now time to focus on ministry. Also, a good opportunity to set some good foundational work before launching into decisions about ministry. Another opportunity is, we've lost members, or members didn't return after the pandemic. This too might be an entry point into a renewal path. And then my final example is, hey, we're not sure if we're going to make it. The survival of the church is in question. And you know what? This too becomes an opportunity for the church to do some work about their identity. These are just examples of moments in a congregation when an investment in renewal would be helpful. There are other times, and there are some churches that put it on a regular rotation, like every 5 years, we're going to revisit our vision. But for those congregations that you are talking to and visiting with, use the vantage point that you have. You don't have the blind spots they have. Listen well. Use your influence to speak into the congregation, and maybe just suggest they connect with me or Thrive, maybe some of these other presentations and people you've heard from today. Because at these moments, congregations are vulnerable to making decisions for the wrong reasons. In these moments, individuals in the congregation can feel anxious. And sometimes out of anxiety come decisions based on the loudest voice in the room, personal preferences, or the biggest giver threatening to leave, or fear that we're going to lose more people. Like, sometimes in situations like this, we're vulnerable at drifting from our mission. And if, excuse me, if you want to learn more or hear more, join me for the church renewal breakout session.
Terrific. Thanks, Elaine. Elaine's kind of a rock star. You know, she just knows when a video would be helpful for keeping us awake after all the stuff that you've been thrown. Good work, everybody. You listened for almost a solid hour to a lot of stuff. Maybe it's been like drinking from a fire hose. And now it's time for a little bit of a break. Before you go, though, let me just say a couple of things. One is, I will stop recording here in just a little bit, and the breakout sessions will not be recorded. That requires more logistical ability than I have. And the second thing is, I'd encourage you to come back for those breaks, for those breakout sessions. Lots of good stuff that we've got to share yet. And on top of that, we're really interested in hearing what you are thinking about what you've heard already over the past hour. So please come on back, and we'll host you for some breakout sessions. All right. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you back here. What time is it now? 3:35. We'll see you back here at about 3:40. See you then.